Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to come and the honour to speak on the Yartzeit of such a great man, Rabbi Sacks. Rabbi Karnofsky, in the beginning, you said that the best way to honour his legacy really is an idea like this, to be able to learn Torah and share Torah. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. Parshas Chayei Sarah begins with the pasuk, Vayihiyu Chayei Sarah, Mea Shana, Ve'esrim Shana, Ve'sheva Shanim, Shnei Chayei Sarah. And the life of Sarah was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah Imenu, Sarah our mother. So the Medrash Rabbah brings down a very interesting and a slightly unusual story in relation to this particular pasuk. And it's about a time when Rabbi Akiva was once teaching in a base medrash, and he noticed that some of his students were falling asleep in class. So if it happens to Rabbi Akiva, I don't have to feel that bad that it happens to me. But he wanted to wake them up. So he says to them the following. So the Bereshis Rabbah says, Rabbi Akiva haya yoshev v'doresh v'tzibur v'hatzibur misnamnem. The students were falling asleep. Bikesh la'oiran, he wants to wake them up. Omar, and he said, Ma rasa Esther shetimloich al sheva ve'esrim u'mea medina. How did Esther Hamalka come to be the queen and reign over 127 different provinces, different countries? Ella Tovoy Esther, Shahaiso Bas Bito Shel Sora. But it's because of the fact that Esther Hamalka is a granddaughter or a descendant of Sarah Imenu, Shahaiso Meyo Ve'esrim Shana, that lived for 127 years. V'timloich al Meyo Ve'esrim Shana Sheva Medinas. And that's why Esther was able to rule over 127 provinces, obviously, when she was married to Achashverosh, the king of Persia, Parasumadai. So because Sarah lived for 127 years, that's how her descendant, Esther, was able to then rule over 127 provinces. And that's how he gets his audience to wake up. It's a bit of a strange story. First of all, if you want your audience to wake up and get involved and get interested again, maybe tell them something a little bit more interesting or shocking, or maybe tell them a joke, like a Milsa de Vadichas or something like that. Why is this particular topic or this particular point going to be the one to wake up and inspire his students again? So there's many answers to this, but one of the answers that's brought down is from the Chidushei Arim, who's the first of the Gerer Rebbes, Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Alto, or Rabbi Itcher Meir. So he says it's not so much a joke or an interesting story that he just wanted to throw out there to, get them again, to draw his students in, get them engaged. It was more of a gentle rebuke. He was saying, if Esther reigns over 127 provinces, and all of those correspond to the 127 years of Sarah's life, then it stands to follow that for each year of Sarah's life, then Esther ruled over one province. So for each month of Esther's life, then perhaps Esther would have ruled over, if it starts off a year per country, then a month would have been, let's say, a city. And for a week, it would have been a town. And for each day, she'd rule over a particular neighborhood. And maybe each minute, a particular block or whatever it is. Until every second of Sarah Imenu's life, we see that Esther, her descendant, was given the schus, the merit, to rule over a particular area of the world at that point in time. So what Rabbi Akiva was trying to do, according to the Chidushei Arim, was to impress upon his students the value and the significance of each moment of their lives. The Torah tells us that the years of Sarah's life, and Avraham Avinu as well, were boim bayomim. They came into their days. They were full. They were complete. Sarah received a lot of reward for every moment of her life because she devoted all of her time and energy to trying to live the most meaningful and the best kind of existence she could. Rabbi Akiva was pretty much telling his students, don't waste a minute. I can see you're falling asleep over here, I get it. But every moment is precious. Every moment has so much potential. And look what you can achieve, not just for yourself, but for all future generations as well. Sarah lived for 127 years. Esther was able, in that source, in that merit, to rule over 127 provinces. So that idea of Sarah's legacy living on in future generations is obviously a big theme of Parshas Chayei Sarah. It begins with telling us about the passing of Sarah Imenu, and that in turn, leads to the obvious question, well, in a Parshah that we talk about the death of Sarah, Why are we calling it the life of Sarah? Why is the name of the Parshah the life of Sarah? And there's so many answers to that question, but one of them was discussed by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he brought forward an idea that was referenced and also elaborated upon by Rabbi Sacks in a lot of different articles and discussions on the weekly Torah portion, like in his Covenant and Conversation. And in all the many hundreds of sichos, or of talks of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, they were, we know that they were brilliant. They contained incredibly unique perspectives on a word, a sentence, a Rashi, a Medrash on the Parshah, but each of them also contain a deep and relevant lesson that we can take to heart and reflect on and act on in order to better ourselves and in order to improve the world around us as well. And that, of course, is something that you find in Rabbi Sacks' teachings, especially his teachings on the Parashah as well. It's so that idea of being able to find a deeply personal and deeply relevant teaching that we can use to improve ourselves and the world around us. And that's something that's really embedded in all of Rabbi Sacks' teachings too. And this parasha, of course, is no different. So, if that's the case, what can we learn from the parasha in which Sarah dies that's called the life of Sarah? It seems to be the complete opposite. So, the question can be answered by a statement from the Gemara Tainis, and it says, Yaakov Avinu lo meis. Yaakov, our father, Jacob, did not die. Okay, of course he passed away, we know that, but the meaning is that yes, he was mourned, and yes, he was buried, but his descendants, Bnei Yisrael, continue his legacy and continue his spiritual heritage, and so Yaakov is still very much alive. And the Gemara continues, and it says, Mazaroi b'chaim, afu b'chaim. Just like his seed is alive, just like his legacy is alive, so too Yaakov is alive. And that same idea is true for all of us. It doesn't just have to be our physical existence that makes us alive. It's also the spiritual content of the lives that we led, of our legacy and what we leave behind. That too is so fundamental. And the message that the name of the parasha is trying to impart is that Sarah's legacy bore fruit long after her physical life ended. And the three main topics in the rest of the parasha, which are buying the cave of Machpelah, and then Eliezer's journey to find a wife for Yitzchak, the son of Avram, and then Avram's eventual remarriage to Keturah, who used to be Hagar, and then having those children, all of that is also part of Sarah's legacy and a continuation of her spirit and what she stood for. How's that the case? So we see that buying the cave of Machpelah is this idea of, well, we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has promised, up until this point in time, 7 times already, promised Avram that Eretz Yisrael would be his and his legacy and for his children forever. But until now, it actually hasn't come to fruition yet, until Sarah passes away. And then Avram goes to Ephron HaChiti in the fields of Mamre and buys the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, the cave of Machpelah, which is in the city of Hebron. And this is the first time that we see the actualization of buying, of having Eretz Yisrael as part of our legacy. And Sarah, who was Avram's partner in every sense of the word, we know that Abraham was Ish HaChesed, a man of chesed, a man of giving, and he gave indiscriminately. Everyone gets whatever they want, and he gives this one food, and this one water, and this one he runs to war to help them, and this one he prays to Hashem not to destroy them. He's helping everybody. He doesn't care who it is. Sorry, Menu, who's standing there by his side and doing exactly what he does, teaching them and teaching people, helping people, wanting to save people. But the difference with Sarah is that she's trying to almost focus and channel Avram's energy and Avram's ability to help, but moving it right into the areas that it most needs and that the world can most benefit from. And we see that where Avram wants to keep both his sons in his house. He wants to keep Ishmael, the son of Hagar. He wants to keep Yitzchak, the son of Sarah. And Hashem says to him, no, you have to listen to your wife Sarah. Kol asher tamar lecha Sarah shma b'kola. Ishmael has to go, because right now your energy has to be directed towards Yitzchak. We see it with Ma'aras HaMachpelah as well, because we know who was buried in the Ma'ara, in the cave, prior to Sarah. It was Adam and Chava. Adam and Chava, the ancestors of the entire world, of all humankind. But when Sarah passes away, that idea, that legacy, is now directed specifically towards the Jewish nation. And this city, in this town, is in this country that belongs to Am Yisrael, to Bnei Yisrael. We then see later on, of course, the next main idea is that Yitzchak gets married, and they have to find a wife for him. And the Parshah goes into a lot of detail describing the manner in which Eliezer, Eved Avram, the servant, comes to try and find this wife. And, how does he know who to look for? What kind of a girl is he looking for? And we know that he's looking for someone that is kind, that is generous, that is giving. So the entire narrative of Yitzchak finding a wife is this idea of looking for someone that also carries on the legacy of his mother, that has that idea of kindness and giving, of Gemilas Chasadim. And that's something that, of course, is part of the hallmarks of a Yid, of a Jewish person to this very day. Like it says, right? Shlosha Simonim Yesh B'Uma, Zu. There are three signs or three distinguishing marks of this Jewish nation. What is it? Baishanim, Rachmanim, and Gomlei Chasadim. That we're kind, we're merciful, and we do acts of generosity and acts of kindness to everyone. And then we see, of course, this legacy of Sarah Imeinu once again when Rivka finally enters into the tent that her late mother-in-law used to have, and the three brachas come back. Three brachas that the tent was blessed with during Sarah's lifetime, the fact that the candles stayed lit from Friday to Friday, the fact that the challah stayed fresh a whole week long, and the fact that the Anonei HaKavod, the clouds of glory, Hashem's Shechina, rested on that tent. Yitzchak sees that this comes back once his wife Rivka enters the tent, and then finally he's able to be comforted. He's comforted when he sees this because he sees that the legacy of his mother will continue. And that legacy, of course, is something that continues that we see even today. This is the source of the three mitzvahs given to women, that of Hadlakas Neros, or lighting the Shabbos candles, the idea of the mitzvah of taking the challah, and by extension all the laws of kashrus, and then of course the idea of taras mishpacha, family purity. And then the last topic in the Parshah, Avram getting married and remarried again, and to Keturah, and having these children, like Rabbi Mervis said originally. It says, it's an interesting one, because it says, of course, that Yaakov gets everything, that Hashem gives him hakoil, right? V'yitzein Avram eskol asher lo liYitzchak. But then afterwards, ulivnei hapilagshim, to the other sons, nosad Avram matanos, he gives presents. So you can see over here clearly there's a big distinction between what he is directing and giving and channeling to Yitzchak as opposed to all of the others. And we also see afterwards that he follows in Sarah's path, in Sarah's legacy, Vayeshalchem Me'al Yitzchak Benoi, that he sends them to the eastern lands. He separates them from Yitzchak. So Parshah that begins with the passing away of Sarah is really and truly about her life, about her legacy. And we know, and the Rebbe explains, that the deeds we do in life lead to further actions in that same vein. Right? Good deeds lead to more good deeds. It's like a ripple effect of goodness. So the goodness that a person does and brings to their family and to their environment, that really creates an ongoing dynamic towards the good. And even after a person's passing, the deeds that we do in our lifetime, they continue to bear fruit, and they help to increase the goodness in this world. And they're a reflection of the ongoing influence of those original deeds. So the events that the Torah describes in this Parshah, buying a portion of Eretz Yisrael, Yitzchak marrying Rivka, Avram fathering more children, all of them are really a direct influence or a direct reflection of Sarah's ongoing influence and channeling and directing that potential in the best way possible. So every moment of her life was used positively. 127 years, 127 provinces. She was able to direct her energies and her potential in the best directions to obtain the best outcomes, and her legacy and influence continues to impact the world today, as seen in her descendants, in all of Klal Yisrael. And much in the same vein, we see that the legacy of Rabbi Sacks, Oliver Sholem, who in his short 72 years, it's interesting, the inverse, 127, and then the inverse of that 72, managed to accomplish so much good in this world. The learning, the Torah, the moral outlook, the guidance he gave to so many, that continues to reverberate throughout the world, even after his passing, long after his passing, in his teachings, in his writings, in his legacy of striving for the truth and the betterment of people all over the world. So Mazoru b'chaim, just as his seed, just as his legacy is alive, afhu b'chaim, so too he is alive.